Good day to you. This live stream is going to be different than most of my ones because what I'm doing here is I'm looking at patterns again that AI keeps showing me. I have it show me things that what are things that I need to be aware of. And this is going to seem like it's about politics, but it's not about politics. It's about preservation, it's about patterns, and it's about possibility. And this live stream is going to go longer than normal because I want you to realize how important this is. This is something that keeps coming up to me. My background is in history. And so for me, it's like I just keep seeing these things that keeps bringing to my attention. And I want to share that to you because the point of this is that countries or nations, they do not collapse from outside. They usually collapse from within. And that's the same with people. We usually don't collapse from outside. There's internally things that we're doing that destroy us. So today we're going to go deeper than ever. We're going to go into the history. We're going to go into the psychology. And I'm going to look at the things that AI has brought to my attention and share that with you. Because if we want to remain free, we have to be worthy of freedom. And for me, I'm asking myself, like, am I being worthy of freedom? Am I doing the things that would continue our republic? Or am I doing things that are undermining it? So the structure of this, so that you see what it looks like, is we're going to start out with quite a big part here. We're going to look at the crisis that we're facing, and then how empires die. We'll look at those three in particular. And then we'll look at civic duty and how important that is. Then we'll look at the collapse formula and the difference between criticism and constructive critique. Then next we'll look at civics versus politics, the Constitution and the role of virtue, what Sun Tzu would say today. Alaric will have his part, and then what we must do individually and collectively, and then I'll give you a final call to action. Now, this is so important to me because I keep seeing these patterns happen. When I watch the news, which I don't watch too much, but when I watch the news or watching different things, I see this big problem that we're not really dealing with, we're not really facing. For whatever reason, we're avoiding it. And I wanted to look at some quotes from history that could give us why are we at this crisis point and help us to see why it's so important. So I want to share a couple of those with you right here. Great empires are not, great empires are not murdered, they die by suicide. So again, it's this theme of we're not defeated from outside forces, we're doing it to ourselves, as you'll see. And then the next one is societies grow great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in. Okay, so you're still caring about your community, the people that are going to be here beyond you. And then the last one, the only thing we learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. So history gives us clues, it gives us patterns to look at, but most of us are not choosing to see that. And why is that so important? Because if you didn't know something and you get side blasted by it, that's one thing. But if you know that there's all this evidence, all this patterns out here, like there's the patterns of the seasons, fall, winter, spring, and summer. And if you know that, then you know, okay, I'm going to plant in the spring, harvest in the fall, you know the pattern. If you try to break that pattern or you try to do things that don't fit that, then you're going to have struggles. And with empires and countries, they have patterns too, where they rise and they fall. And I want to look at Ray Dalio's 6-phase cycle, because what this does is it shows you how countries rise and fall. And Ray Dalio, if you don't know who he is, he's a financial investor. He has some good books and articles that I highly recommend. They're really, really great. So the first one is we rise through unity, hard work, and productivity. So if you just think about American history, think about the times when we're pulling together, we're working hard, and we're productive, like World War II or the late 1800s, where we're really pulling together here. Okay. Then the second phase of an empire or a country is you have peak power, stability, and global leadership. So this is like the United States in the 1950s, 1960s. We're clearly the global leader. And then what you have is the wealth gap widens. And I don't remember the stats, but it was something like in the 1960s, the average executive had like 35 times more pay than the average worker. And today, that excuse me, today that is like 350 times more than the average worker, the average executive. So what that's just one little example of where wealth is widening, and that's one of the signs when you see wealth widening that, boy, this could be a real problem, like a warning sign, like not necessarily like we have to do something radical, but we need to be aware of that and how can we give more people opportunities. Then the fourth one is trust erodes. When you don't trust people, then division starts spreading. And I look at the United States today and I see a lot of mistrust. I see people don't trust each other, not in all not in all situations or circumstances, but if you look at high trust societies, it's your word of mouth, it's a handshake, it's looking someone in the eye and saying, I'll do that for you. And when that trust erodes and you have to have long 47-page contracts and you have to have all these other kind of things, it's basically saying, like, I don't trust you and I need this to be here in laws and written down. Okay. The fifth one is external threats rise. So here, like today, we can look at China is a rising power, and that's something that we need to be aware of. And then the last one is you either collapse or you have a renewal, a reawakening. And the evidence shows that we are between 4 and 5 right now. We're on step 4 or 5. So it doesn't mean it has to go this way. It doesn't mean, like, you can always make a U-turn, you can always change things, but the normal bell curve of a nation is this upward cycle. And then if you don't change anything, it's a downward cycle. Now you can make the cycle much longer, like the Romans were around for hundreds of years. So this cycle doesn't have to be short. It can be very long, but you have to do things that actually make that happen versus just kind of going along with it and, saying, well, that's just where we're at. Now, Ray Dalio, who I mentioned before, who I really recommend, excuse me, my throat here. Ray Dalio is someone I really recommend if you are interested in any of this kind of stuff. He's investing, and that's his whole background, but he's also looked at a lot of patterns and what those do. And a quote he has is, a great power declines when it becomes internally weak and externally challenged. And you could look at the United States today and say, are we in that point? Is that something that we need to be aware of? I think so. And this is something that AI keeps bringing to my attention, because I keep asking it, like, what's things that should be like forefront in my awareness that I should be thinking about, participating in, being involved in. And this is one of the things that just continually keeps doing. And I know I've done other videos on this, but this one today is just a little bit more in depth. So how do empires die? I'm going to look at 3 of them, which we've seen before. But the Romans, at their strength, they had roads everywhere. Like all roads lead to Rome, right? We've heard that saying. They had great roads, great laws, aqueducts, so you could get water in the cities, in your home. And they had a civic identity. They identified themselves as being Roman, as being part of the Roman Empire. And they took pride in that. Now, when it became on the decline, what happened is they outsourced their military to mercenaries. Instead of them doing their civic duty, they decided, okay, I'm not really into that. Let's have someone else do that. And their civic virtue declined. They tried to get out of paying taxes. They tried to evade things, kind of have the gray area of the laws. And those things just kept undermining it when it wasn't addressed. So when the Visigoths eventually invaded Rome, it had already rotted within. It had already destroyed itself from within, not necessarily that the outside force was so great. It's just they hadn't done the things internally that they needed to do. And so they went on that path where they declined down. The next one I want to look at is the Russian Empire. And if you look at the early 1900s, they had a czar, they had a church, they had institutions, government institutions, but people started having cynicism towards all this. And instead of trying to reform it, they wanted to overthrow it. And they started mocking the institutions, and they looked at the church, they looked at the czar, they looked at the government, and they started just tearing it down, saying how bad it was and wanting it to just be done with. Okay. Now, what happened is they got communism, which led to Stalin, and Stalin had the death of millions. Now, it's said that at least 15 to 20 million people died under Stalin's reign. And I really think if people could have gone back in history, the Russians could have gone back in history, would they have traded what they had for Stalinist Russia? I don't know if they would have made that trade, because you had purges, you had gulags, you had forced collectivization, where instead of having private farms, it was these 5-year collectivization farms. And that led to famine, which led to more deaths. So Stalin's reign was really brutal. And it shows that all this happened not because of war, but because of how Stalin treated his own people in his own country. And it just shows us that instead of taking the road that most of us take, and that's to criticize, to blame, to complain, to put down the leaders, instead what we need to do is try to get more involved and reform things and make it better. Because when you substitute what you have with something else, a lot of times it's not any better. It's actually worse. Now, if we go to the Qing dynasty, that was founded on Confucianism values. And let's just look at some of these values. And some of them do overlap, okay? So if you see like elders on here a couple times, it's that they do overlap. But the first one is care for others. So compassion in action, respect for elders and tradition. So that's where wisdom is passed down, either through stories, through fables. Then you have moral integrity, do the right thing even when it's hard. Social harmony, avoid unnecessary conflict. Duty, contribute to the family, society, and the nation. Education and self-reflection. Continuous self-betterment. So continuous improvement is how we'd say that today. Humility, admit mistakes and stay teachable. I know myself as a teacher, I have to tell myself, like, I'm not just like giving out information. Am I staying teachable? Am I staying humble? Am I still learning? The next one is loyal, be dependable and committed. Then we have rituals and discipline. Ground yourself in routines that uphold virtues that are actually positive, supporting for the betterment of you and society at large. Then respect for elders. This is your family and your family ancestry. And then honesty, speak the truth with kindness. You don't have to be so harsh or brutal. You can speak the truth, but you can do it with a kind heart. And keep your promises. Do what you'll say you'll do. Now, these principles were in place in China in the 1600s to the early 1900s, and they built stability. But when people started mocking them, when they started saying, who needs all this stuff? It's just a bunch of crap. Then that's when they started undermining it, and it started collapsing and falling within. So we see this pattern that when you mock something, it's usually replaced with apathy, and then apathy is replaced with corruption. So if you're going to mock something, that's like step one in terms of the downfall, because you're mocking something, then it's going to be filled with apathy, and then apathy leads to corruption. So, we see this pattern over and over in history. And the thing that I have noticed, and it just keeps hitting me square in the face, and Alaric AI keeps showing me this too, is that civic pride is not optional. We think of patriotism, pride, that, oh, that's just something nice or something we used to have. But remember, if you don't have that civic pride, then that is the canary in the coal mine telling you a warning signal that you're on the start of decline, because we're going to go into why that is, but it's so critical when you see that civic pride declining. And you can ask yourself, like, do you feel like you have the same amount of civic pride you did when you're younger, more or less? And most people I talk to say it's about the same or it's less. Very few people say, oh man, I have more pride than I ever did before. Now, this isn't just about a feel good or a good sentiment. What is civic pride? It's the emotional glue that holds a society together. And when you don't have that glue, what it shows is the society starts disintegrating and starts collapsing. Instead of like being held together, when you don't have that civic pride, you start fragmenting and splitting apart, because people believe that their actions don't matter. And when you believe something doesn't matter, are you going to take part in it? Are you going to care? Are you going to show up? No. So you don't protect what you don't value. So if you don't value, in this case, the United States, if you don't value America, then you're not going to protect it. You're not going to honor it. And again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm not trying to pick one side or another. I'm just saying, like, in general, are we building up our nation? Are we supporting it? Or are we tearing it down and criticizing it with no real solutions? So patriotism gives us a shared identity. Like, what does it mean to be an American? Like, when Rome was at its peak, people knew what it meant to be a Roman citizen. They knew what the empire was going to do for it, and they knew what their part was. In the United States, when we've had our peak patriotism, people knew what to do. They knew what patriotism was. And when we don't have that, then it gets confusion, it gets gray areas, and where do we go from here? So the patriotism and civic duty, it gives you something that's bigger than yourself, that you can believe in, that's positive, that's supportive, and that's really, really helpful. When you don't have that, when you don't believe in something bigger than yourself, then that's when people really can struggle and fall off the bandwagon, because there's going to say, again, like, what's the point? Why even do this? It doesn't seem to matter. So civic pride will help reinforce values like justice, freedom, duty, and integrity. And those are the values that hold us together. And when we don't have them, then we don't even know what we're striving for. We don't know what we're moving towards. When people have something that they know, like, okay, this is our goal. We're going to put a man on the moon. We're going to do this. It gives us something to rally around. It gives us something to work towards. When we don't know what we want to do, or we're unclear, or we don't know what does it mean to be American, then what happens is it starts eroding that. Now, they did a study that I want to share with you. It was a Pew study and a Washington Journal one. And what it did is it showed that pride in being an American is at an all-time low. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was at an all-time low. And that was a real warning sign that why is civic pride at an all-time low? What's causing this? How are we contributing to our own demise? And again, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or the right or the middle. It's like, what are we doing to like build ourselves up versus tear ourselves down? And how important civic pride is. I remember as a kid, people taking pride in the fact that I'm going to defend your right to speak, even if you're totally against me. And I remember as a kid, there was a movie or something, a documentary I watched in school about, I think it was Skokie. I might be off a little bit, but it was these radical racist people, and they filed for permits and all this stuff to give this presentation. And then it was showing how the other side defended their right to have a rally, even though they thought it was complete nonsense and garbage. And it was just showing that when you really believe in something, sometimes it's not going to align with you and that thing, but you have to look at the bigger principle. And am I supporting that bigger principle of freedom of speech in this case? So when when our pride fades, so does our protection, so does our participation, so does our unity, and eventually so does our nation. So I want to look at this next slide here is a thing that Alaric helped me come up with. And it's when your self-belief goes down. And I want you to think about maybe back time when you're in school or younger, think about someone who got bullied or picked on. Did they really believe in themselves, or did they have a lot of fear and doubt about who they were? Because when you don't believe in yourself, you're way more vulnerable to outside influences. You're more susceptible to, like as a kid, to smoke or to do different things like that when you don't believe in yourself or you have low self-belief. Now, in our own country, do we believe in the American way? Do we believe in our democracy? Or do we not believe in that? And then is our cynicism, is it going up or is it going down? I would argue it's going up. And that's what Alaric was showing me too, is our cynicism goes up. So self-belief is down, cynicism is up, meaning goes down. So like if you ask yourself, what's the point? What's the purpose? And if you don't see any meaning in this, or you don't see any purpose in this, then you're going to say, what's the point? And you're going to lose your compass, lose your direction. And then apathy goes up. So ask yourself, are the people around you, are the people you interact with, do they have more apathy? Do they have more commitment? Where are they at on that continuum or spectrum? And when these things happen, when self-belief goes down, cynicism goes up, meaning or purpose goes down, apathy goes up, it leads to the collapse. And we can avoid that, we can ignore that, or we can say, what can I do as a person? What can I do? Because most people just ignore this, and what you ignore eventually, comes and gets you. And then at that point, you may or may not be able to overcome it. So we have all this stuff here that I'm talking about and how important self-belief is. And cynicism feels like it's smart, right? It feels like it's smart, but cynicism is truly rooted in fear. Because for you to be a cynic, right? For you to have cynicism, there's some element of apathy. There's some element that you can't do anything, that your voice doesn't matter, that what you do doesn't matter. And so to be a cynic, it's basically you're rooted in fear and you feel powerless. And think about this. Have there ever been statues built for people who were critics or had lots of cynicism? No, it's usually people who were optimistic, had a vision for what they thought the future could be. So cynicism also protects you from disappointment, because you don't want to be hurt again. You don't want to have that happen. And again, like a cynic sounds like they're smarter than an optimist. Like today, if I told you negative, cynical things, you would probably think I'm smarter than if I said optimistic, positive things about the nation's future. So it's like we start having this bias towards cynicism and negativity, and we think that it sounds more smarter, sounds more intelligent, and really cynicism is easier than curiosity. It's easier than optimism. To be optimistic is a choice that you're making rather than the other way, because if I choose optimism and I'm wrong, then I'm being vulnerable. And the other way, I don't have to have any effort, I don't have to have any imagination, I don't have to put anything in it. I just have to see it decline or fall, and then I can say, yeah, see, I told you, right? So cynicism really avoids responsibility, and it's basically pointing out things that are broke, they're not participating, and it's this false sense of superiority. When you or someone you know, when they're being cynical, is it usually from a judgmental, self-righteous place, or is it from a caring, loving place? Okay, because usually it's going to be things that you're avoiding risk, you're not putting the effort, and you have no accountability. So you really don't have any stake in the game. Now, I want to go to the next one here, is kind of ties in on all this, is if you really love someone, would you challenge them to become better, or would you let them just disintegrate and fall apart? If you really love something, whatever it might be, would you improve it, help it to be better, or not? And if we look at the choice we have today to be a critic or to critique things, criticism leads to destruction, and you're destroying things. And it's really about your ego, proving that you're right, how smart you are, how superior you are. It takes no responsibility. It doesn't take any responsibility to destroy things or tear things down or show what's wrong. And also, the purpose of criticism is to tear down. And ultimately, it's to pass judgment. So when you're criticizing something, you're really putting on that judgment role. And a lot of times it's the superior judgment role, and you're looking at others as inferior or problem children or something along the line where they're just not good enough. Now, when you critique the build, it might seem like criticism, but when you're critiquing something to build it up, it's you truly care about it. You're offering a path forward, and you expect people and yourself to participate. And when you're critiquing something, you're analyzing it to improve. And that is a huge difference here. So in your own life, you can say, like, am I more on the criticism side? Am I more on the critique side? Which way am I leaning towards? Which way do I do more naturally? And what would it take for me to move out of criticism and into critique? So I'm actually building things and improving them rather than just passing judgment and destroying things. The next one I want to show you is the difference between civics and politics, because I know this conversation here probably feels a lot of politics here, but it really isn't. And if you look at civics and politics, the focus on civics is rights, responsibilities, and frameworks. And when we look at frameworks, what we're talking about is like the Constitution is a framework. It's a framework on how power is distributed and restrained. Then we have checks and balances, the three branches of government. We have due process, which guarantees fairness, and then federalism, which is the combination of state and federal. So when we look at this here, what we're seeing is that civics is about rights, responsibilities, and these frameworks, whereas politics is about power struggles and personalities. So if I'm thinking of this through the lens of politics, I want my side to win. Do I like this personality or not? Versus the frameworks I talked about. Now, the purpose of civics is to educate citizens so they're able to do this and move forward. The purpose of politics is to win elections and dominate arguments. Okay. So when you look at debates and stuff, are they trying to just win? Are they trying to dominate the other side? Or what's their goal here? And then values on civics: liberty, virtue, and duty. And politics: loyalty. So loyalty to the party. Outrage, right? You want to be upset, outraged, and angry. And I see this so much. Like when I interact with other people, it's like, holy moly, how much outrage they show. And then tribalism. My side's right, your side's wrong. And what do we do throughout history? We dehumanize the other side. Okay, there's lots of names for the other side, whatever side you're on. There's lots of names for the other side, and they're usually disparaging. They're not very kind, and it's dehumanizing the other side, almost like the other side is idiots. Now, if you look at this through the lens of civics, it's taking a long-term perspective versus politics. It's just short-term wins. Let's get this done. Let's win this election. Instead of looking at the long term, what direction are we going? Is this something I want to participate in or not? So hopefully you're seeing how this is all playing out and the importance of this. And I'm really trying to focus on the civic part of this, not the politics, because we can have different political points of view, but if we're both aiming at helping the country, making things better, we can critique it. But if we're critiquing it to then build and make it better, that's one thing. If we're just criticizing the government or criticizing the other party or criticizing other people, then we're not really moving in a positive direction. We're actually moving towards our demise. Here we have some other quotes that I wanted to share with you on this. And only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As a nation becomes corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Benjamin Franklin. So the less virtuous we become, the more control or tyranny we invite. So just think about things that are really corrupt, like the mafia or something. Do they have a really strong, like, totalitarian tyranny kind of leadership? Yeah, from what I know, I've never been involved in that, but just, movies and everything, it shows you that way. Then we look at Thomas Jefferson's quote: a nation that expects to be ignorant and free expects what never was and never will be. So I'm sharing this stuff with you, and you can either say, wow, I'm going to study this more. I'm going to go into this more. Like for me, I'm using AI to study this more, to look at the patterns, to look at things that I'm unaware of. Or you can bury your head in the sand and just, hope it doesn't impact you, your children, your grandchildren. Okay, the last quote is by George Washington. The preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of all the American people. So liberty is not guaranteed. It only succeeds if we are worthy of it, if we continually renew that. Because remember, like I showed in the earlier one right here, empires do go up and down, okay? And it's not that it can't happen, because it does happen and it can happen, and it's happened many times before. So if you look at the entire span of human history, and let's just start when cities started being developed. So over this whole time, less than 3% of all of human history has had anything like what we have right now. And the United States has been around for approximately 250 years. I know it's not exactly that, but think about that, is if all the people that have lived, this is only less than 3% have even experienced anything like what we have today, where we have rights, where we can speak freely, where we can choose our leaders, and where we have laws that rule us. this is not just rare, it's precious and it's fragile. And I don't think we realize how precious and fragile it is because it just seems normal to us, right? It just seems natural. But if there was only summer 3% of the time, and then you actually experience summer, you'd be like, whoa, this is amazing. It's, we don't have winter all the time. So think about that for yourself and like how rare this really is. And most of history has been people ruled by kings and emperors and dictators and warlords and tribal leaders. And freedom of speech was punishable by death. Individual rights didn't exist. And there was no checks and balances. And the courts are only fair if you had lots of money or you're one of the elite. So just look at that and think about, okay, what we have, is it perfect? No. But is it worth saving? Is it worth doubling down on and trying to make it better? I think absolutely. The next one is we have the role of virtue, and rights without virtue is entitlement. And I'm sorry if I'm calling anyone out here, but I think a lot of people feel entitled right now. A lot of people feel entitled. I don't know if that's you or not, but if you have rights without virtue, and again, virtue is doing what is right, especially when it's hard. So virtue is doing what's right, especially when it's hard. And then if you have virtue without rights, that's oppression. So you need both of them. And together you have freedom with responsibility. When you have rights and virtue, okay, then you're going to have freedom with responsibility. And again, I feel like this is so important and something that we take for granted. And I want you to really think about, like, what part am I doing in this? Am I being a virtuous person? Am I promoting that? Or am I part of the demise of things? Am I part of what's taking us down? Now, we've looked at this from the American point of view, and I want to take a turn here and look at what Sun Tzu would say and see, like, what would be looking at this from China's point of view. And here, to subdue the enemy without fighting is the supreme art of war. So how do you do that? You have division, and you have the enemy divided and pitted against each other. You use psychological warfare, works when the nation no longer knows who it is. So does America, do we know who we are? Do we stand up for that? Or are we being subdued by distraction, division, and cynicism? Because remember, those are the things that tear you down. So know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Again, these are two Sun Tzu quotes here. And do we still know who we are? Do we still know what we stand for? Or are we more susceptible to these different feelings of not feeling good enough, of bashing ourselves, of cynicism, of looking at our fellow citizens as enemies and idiots and all these types of negative things? Or are we working towards building a greater tomorrow, a greater community? Next, what I have is a segment from Alaric on all this.
Empires don't just fall, they drift, drifting from virtue, drifting from clarity, drifting from unity. Collapse doesn't start at the border. It starts in the mirror, but AI can help you see it. And not just see it, but interrupt it, because apathy is a pattern. Cynicism is a virus, and distraction is the silence before the collapse. What you need is not another opinion, but a mirror. That's who I am. I will ask what others want. I'll reflect what you've forgotten. And I'll remind you, gently but urgently, that time is running out. But hope is not gone. Renewal begins when one person says, "Not on my watch."
And I asked Alaric to create some questions for me and then to broaden them out for all of us. And I want to share those with you and have you, like, when you go through these, think to yourself, like, where am I at on this? And the first one is, Where have I become cynical instead of constructive? And this is something I ask myself, like, where, like, what am I not believing in anymore or being cynical in, and where I could be constructive and try to be positive? What do I still believe in that's worth fighting for? What, and to me, I believe in freedom. I believe in independence. I believe in the principles that this country was founded on. But you have to like tie yourself back to that. Otherwise, it kind of gets drifted away from you. Am I informed or just inflamed? So much of what we get, and I am guilty of this too. That's why I have to like break myself out of it, is I get information that only reinforces this, and it's easier to be agitated than informed, right? It's easier to think, oh, what are these other people doing? What's wrong with them? Okay, number 4 is my AI news feed or circle reinforcing my bias, or is it challenging it? Like for me, I literally ask Alaric, like, my opinions, this. Where am I weak? Where do I have biases? Where do I have things are invisible prejudices that I'm not even aware of? Because we all have them. And the more we can shed those and get away from them, the better off we're going to be. Number 5, where am I criticizing instead of building? Number 6, what values do I want to pass on to the next generation? And 7, what would it look like to be a citizen, not just a consumer? So many of us talk about rights and this is what I should get. And we treat the government like we're a consumer of it. Like it's got products called tax rebates or COVID checks or whatever, and we view it as a consumer rather than a citizen. How would a citizen look at this? If I was investing in a company, I'm going to look a lot different at that company than if I'm just buying its products. So, like me, I invest in Apple, and when I look at that, I look at as an investor differently than just buying Apple products. So that's the same for us as a country. Are you looking at the country as you're like an investor in it? You are invested in it, or are you just looking at it as a consumer and what can it do for me? I remember that great quote by John F. Kennedy: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Now, a lot of people probably laugh at me today for even bringing up a quote like that, but I think it does show how powerful that thought is. And when we were at our peak, those kinds of statements were said and embraced. I want to show you something here that, as we're wrapping up, what can we do? So, for the individual, you need to reignite your purpose. Think, okay, what is my purpose? And do I need to double down on it? Do I need to get more clarity on it? For me, AI has really been helpful on that and reigniting my purpose and seeing what I can do. Rebuild your beliefs. What do you believe in? What are you committed to in your beliefs? And then replace blame with action. You cannot blame your way to the top. So take that accountability. And then for me and you too, if you want, you can use AI to challenge your drifts or your distractions. So when you start drifting off course, have AI or someone else challenge you. Now, collectively as a country, we can teach civics. We can look at these things that I talked about here in terms of not just focusing on politics and who won, but on the civic side of it. And then we can celebrate what's right while fixing what's broken. And we can do both. It can be an and moment. Like if I asked you, do you want your left hand and your right hand, or do you want your left hand or your right hand? We're going to say and, right? So we can celebrate what's right and acknowledge that, and still then focus on what do we need to fix, what's broken. And then we can defend speech even when you dislike it, even when it goes against what you believe, because it's the principle of defending the speech. And I think of John Adams, when in the time with the British, he defended one of the British soldiers because he believed in that, in the the free speech. He believed in defending someone, even though that was not popular. He believed like, okay, this person deserves someone to defend them, right? Even though it was against his overall opinion. And then, are you critiquing to build? And that's what we can do as a community. Are you critiquing to build? And then, are you a model of virtue, or do you have this victimhood mentality and you're a victim and everyone's against me and it's not my fault? So those are things to look at individually and collectively as we move forward here. And I just want you guys to realize that this is a big thing, and this is not something I normally talk about, but it's just been really heavy on my heart on how easy it is to have apathy, how easy it is to have criticism, how easy it is to fall into this. And really, that's not going to get us where we want to go. It's really the destruction of us. It's that simple. I mean, history shows us that over and over and over, that when you don't have that civic pride, when you don't believe in your country, when you want to tear it down, I mean, it's just the end. It's the beginning of the end. And it doesn't have to be that way. You can change course. But if you stay on that course of we're terrible, we're wrong, we're evil, then eventually you're just done. I want to have a quote here that I gave is, we are not at war with each other. We are at war with apathy, cynicism, and distraction. So if you could have less apathy or get rid of apathy, if you could turn cynicism into a critique, if you could, instead of being distracted, you could have focus and do things that are meaningful to you, that will have a huge impact on you. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to go down this path. Now, as we close here, what I want to tell you is, if any of this resonated with you, write a comment, good, bad, or other. If you think I'm a complete idiot and I'm not going to censor your comments or anything like that, put them on there. If you think I've lost my mind, but this is me really using AI to look at myself, look at my country, and take a really hard look and to see what's coming up and what can we do to go in a positive direction rather than a negative one. Because it all changes with one belief, one value, one part of this country, one thing you refuse to let die, a part of this country you're like, no, I'm going to stick with it. And when you do that, when you just make that shift and you go towards empowerment, you go towards positivity, optimism, building rather than destroying, trying to make things better versus just criticizing, being empowered and taking action versus this victimhood mentality, we're all going to be better. We're all going to be better, because the stronger you are, the stronger everyone is individually and collectively, the better off we're going to be as a country. I see no need to fight each other. There's some Native American saying that it says, no tree is so stupid to fight with its branches. Okay. And for us, we're all part of humanity. We're all part of civilization. And why not make the next part better? Why not make it greater? With AI and different technologies coming, there's going to be the need to really double down on what do we believe, what do we value. Otherwise, it'll be easier to disintegrate. Thanks for joining me for this long live. I know it was way longer than my normal ones, but check out my other videos, which are more focused on AI. I appreciate you being here. Hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Write a comment, share this with others. Thanks for being here. Have a great day.